The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Thank you for calling in to the Energy Star Multifamily New Construction Multifamily Workbook tutorial webinar. We'll start the presentation in a few minutes to allow additional attendees to dial in. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Before we launch into the content, I wanted to share some tips for participating in today's webinar. To expand or collapse the webinar panel for better viewing, click on the small orange box with the white arrow in the top left of the software panel. There are options for accessing the audio from today's program. If you are dialing in by phone, please be sure that the phone call button is selected. Alternatively, you can select computer audio. Everyone will be muted throughout today's program. If you have a question, please enter it in the questions box. We will respond to typed questions as we go and answer any remaining questions during the Q&A portion at the end of the presentation. Please note this webinar is being recorded, and all registrants will be sent a copy of the slides. A recorded version of the presentation will be available after the webinar. With that, we'll begin.
Great. Hello, everybody. My name is Scott Pusey. I am a rater, a QAD, and provide technical support for the Energy Star Multifamily New Construction Program. Today's webinar is going to be a workbook, the tutorial of the Multifamily Workbook for the Energy Star program. And this is what today's agenda is going to look like. We're going to be doing the guided tour and using the actual workbook Excel file as our guide. What is not on the agenda are any program overviews, certification pathways, sort of discussing the nuances between those different pathways, the certification process, training requirements, or the MFNC website. But there are links. This is a live link. Slides will be sent out after, and you can use these links to navigate around to the ones that are applicable. In terms of questions, it would be nice for you to type in the questions as you have them. Please try to include the tab or sort of a reference for what the question is about. We're going to try to answer as many as possible as they come in, but some will probably need to be held to the end. And with that, we're going to stop the presentation and jump right into the actual workbook. A couple of things to sort of orient to. This is a sort of example workbook. There's a lot of pre-populated data in here. To get a clean new workbook, we always recommend you go to the Multifamily New Construction website. This is the website. It's new and updated. To find the Multifamily Workbook, you scroll down to the bottom, and it is under supporting documents. These verification files, so the Multifamily Workbook is right here. Click on it, download it, and away you go. So the example workbook, like I said, looks like this. And as you can see, is lots of information already populated in here. There is very similar, I can't say that it's the exact example workbook, but it is going to be very similar to this one that is available also on the website. So you can download that and sort of have breadcrumbs to follow for perhaps the first time that you're using it. I found it very helpful when I was learning how to use this. So The introduction tab is a great place to start, and where we're going to start today. It has the naming convention up here at the very beginning. You can see that this is revision 4 of the multifamily workbook and edition 3. That edition 3 is telling me that I have the latest and greatest from the website. And you know, when you click on this link, you're going to be able to see down there at the bottom the URL that pops. Rev 4 is the design. Sorry, that's for the HVAC design report. The example is here. Am I showing you the wrong spot? No. Either way, this is so that you know that you are using the latest and greatest one. You want to compare that to what you downloaded from the website. Also important to note, there's lots of introduction sections at the beginning of the workbook. It includes a lot of very helpful information. So sort of jumping ahead a little bit, there's always going to be you know, an introduction that is shown, and you want to read that at least the first time that you go through using the workbook. There's lots of nice information in there about what's required to be inputted in the tab that you're working on and what's not. The Energy Star team is great at helping with and providing support for the workbook. So if you happen to run across a bug or have some more questions or even suggestions about how to make this tool work better, please email energystarhomes@energystar.gov. That email link is right here at the top. One of the proposed changes that some of you might be aware of, proposed changes with Rev 5 of the program, is to make the workbook mandatory for the ERI path. It's always been mandatory for ASHRAE and Prescriptive, but the proposal in revision 5 to also make the common space portions of the verification mandatory to be included in the with the ERI pathway, and putting this information into the multifamily workbook is going to really enhance the QA/QC by standardizing that documentation pathway. It's, like I said, for common space measures specifically. You can report more information in there related to ERI, but it's mandatory for the common space measures. At least that's the proposal. And it's also going to reduce the program complexity, and we think a lot of partner confusion by having fewer pathway differences. So jumping into and scrolling down to the bottom, you can see there's sort of, these are all the different tabs that are in here. The tab instructions, these are very high level tab instructions. I find it really helpful to also come down here and look at the color coding. And so you can see that there's a lot of different colors even within the tabs at the bottom. And those are meant to indicate different things. So anything in yellow is required for the preliminary design submission, the PDF submission to the MRO. Perhaps it's a midpoint submission that you want to do to your QAD, but it's something that the reviewer would need to know about and have information about in order to perform a complete and thorough preliminary design submission. There's also orange ones, orange colored cells, so that's for the as-built submission at the end of the project. And then there's blue for optional. And as with most logic in workbooks, there's also pass and fail color coding that comes up as well. With the building information tab, this is where you will enter a lot of high-level information about the project and things that are required in order to sort of make the workbook work. It pivots off of some of the answers that are in here, particularly the pathway, which one you're choosing, what version of the program is being that the project is going to be pursuing, to some extent the heating and cooling pathway, Definitely the climate zone, you want to input that in. That is a big pivot tool for later on in some of the tabs that we're going to get to. And I wanted to also draw attention to Zero Energy Ready. Sarah with the Zero Energy program is going to be talking to us all at the end of this webinar about specifics to the Zero Energy Ready incorporation into the workbook, which has been a relatively recent feature. But just to show you that pivot, when you say no, you can see now at the bottom that tab for Zero Energy Ready has disappeared. So when you click it again, it reappears and gives you that information. And that's going to work and hold true for Energy Star Next Gen. You would be able to use that. We're not going to get into too much about it, but you can also do the same thing if you have a FIAS project. There's some language and footnotes in the program documents that, when you do choose to use the FIAS pathway, it's going to open another tab and ask you for more information. So let's get into the rater design and rater field tabs. Those are the sort of first real areas where a rater is going to be able to start entering very useful information into the tool. And up at the top for both, this is the rater design checklist tab. This is the rater field checklist tab. Sorry, that's at the bottom. So up at the top, it looks the same. There's a real nice functionality here that you can select which pathway you want to pursue, which pathway the project is pursuing, and it is going to hide the ones, it's going to hide these questions down here that are not necessarily applicable to that pathway. There's also a nice function to show footnotes, and so the footnotes related to that particular section can also be shown and hidden with the click of a button. And you can see over here that this is the pathway that has been chosen for this particular example. So all of the prescriptive requirements should be and are showing up down here under the rater design checklist, while anything that is applicable just to ERI or just to ASHRAE has been hidden. Things that are applicable to both prescriptive and ERI will show up. So it's got that logic built in there. A note to say that the comments column over here is something that's very helpful for the rater to include for things that are a little like particular to this project. The more comments and more notes that you can save in here, the better. When this file does get shipped off, when you do send it to the MRO or whoever is reviewing the project, the more information they have about particulars of your project, the easier it will be for them to review it, and probably the fewer comments and fewer questions you'll get back from them. So that is the rater design. At the bottom of the section is an area for the rater to complete their name. This is being pulled from the introduction, not the introduction, the building information tab. And so when a rater is ready to say, yep, all of this stuff, I'm taking responsibility for, all of the information that has been inputted in here, you're going to type your name, the rater will type their name and add a date that they completed that review. So this is rater design, and it's just drop downs to check off whether it's applicable for that rater verified column. Same thing for rater field. The same functionality is up here with the show hide, and this one is all pathways have been selected right now. So if I wanted to select a pathway, let's say I'm going to do prescriptive because that's what we have over in rater design, you click it off and it show hides the rest of the stuff down there. All right, so that's rater design and rater field. At the bottom, this one is slightly different for rater field in that it's initials. And so the information is being pulled from the building information tab. Again, if there's any builder verified things, builder initial and date is going to be added, and it's rater initials this time. LP stands for licensed professional. If there's any licensed professional items, this is an opportunity for them to sign off on that as well. All right, we're going to move into the unit testing results page. And so this one is a big table. I've actually got some splits happening right now. I'm going to unsplit it. This is really helpful for navigating this particular tab to use the split function. And so orienting you to what's included here, these are the, this is the unit types section of this unit testing results tab. And what is meant to be put in here are sort of the typical unit types that are present in the building. And so the way to add more rows is to use a plus sign. And so that's going to add, you know, let's say you have more unit types from sort of these typical unit types than you have room for, you know, right out of the box as you downloaded the file. You just make sure that you have your cursor in C16 or C17, you know, one of these cells that is towards the bottom of the book, and you'll be able to add. You can also subtract them the same way. It's going to give you a warning, but it will subtract them. So what kind of information are you putting in here? You're putting in information basically about the area, the perimeter. You're giving these typical units a unit ID. So all of the A1s, A2, S1, B1, these are all 1-bedroom units. Typically, I arrange it by, you know, studio, 1-bedroom, 2 bedrooms as you go through the unit mix for the project. B2 indicates for this particular project, this is now a 2-bedroom or 2 sleeping unit unit. You can then correspond with whether it's a studio, a dwelling unit, a sleeping unit. All of those definitions are provided. And entering the area, the perimeter, how high the dwelling unit's ceiling to height is. And now the tool is going to start sort of like using that information. It's going to calculate the enclosure area. You can see this is a white cell, so that's a calculated cell. The formula is up here. It is locked. You cannot change that by design. And yeah, you start putting in this information. The rater is going to be asked to say whether this ASHRAE 62-2010 is the project designing to 62-2010 or a later version of 62-2, and that is going to use that input to calculate how much ventilation, the minimum ventilation that's required per the program documents. So that's a drop down from right here. And there's notes in here to remind you about the functionality with that. The ventilation comparison that's being made right here is to say, okay, the tool is now comparing how much designed ventilation is being included in the project. You can pull this information from the HVAC design report, plans and specs, however, but this is the number that the rater is saying this is how much ventilation the team is proposing to provide. You've told the tool which ASHRAE version you're doing it, and so then it's going to give you a pass-fail. There's other information over here about kitchen ventilation, whether it's intermittent, whether the bathroom ventilation is intermittent or continuous. All of this in the gold, in the yellowish and gold boxes is meant to be done at that preliminary, for the preliminary design submission. So these are the sort of, you know, typical unit types that are included in the project, typically pulled from like a unit mix table or something like that within the plans. And down here is the actual sort of testing results. And so once you put in, these now are like units within, you know, addresses within the building. And so it's one line for every address included in the building, and then the rater is going to assign what unit type is it. Is it an A1, A2, etc.? And now it's going to pull that information that was entered previously and just provide these testing targets. And so the testing targets then can be used in the field to give you a target for what the minimum project requirements are based on the information that you filled out prior. And yeah, it's really nice. You can then also enter information. So this is all tested information, tested dummy information for this particular one. You can see this project was sampled. There's not information, there's not testing information in each and every one of these line items, which is representing an apartment in the building. But it is going to use logic, and when you enter a value, it's going to give you a pass-fail. So this particular one has got duct leakage. It's got all the information in here. Won't go through each and every one of them. But getting back to the split function, I'm going to split my screen again. And so I wanted to show you what this looks like at the bottom. At the bottom of the section here, there is an area to put in information about failed tests. And so what do you do when an apartment didn't quite measure up, it didn't quite meet the requirements? And for this particular one, I believe it's duct leakage that's failing. So I'm just going to scroll over here. Yeah, unit 108. We can see that in this example file, unit 108 had 51 CFM25 of duct leakage. And I think that is too high. So up here in the top of my screen, you can see that for unit 108, it has been corrected to 40 for the total duct leakage, which is a passing result because the duct leakage to outdoor limit is listed right here for unit 108. I realize there's a couple of tiles here open with the split screen. So just to go over that one more time, up at the top of this testing results is where all of the clean information is. This is sort of like the final, everything is passing sort of information to give to the MRO. Unit 108, that's unit ID B2, is showing 40 CFM total duct leakage, but it didn't get there right away. There was a failure, and that is reported down at the bottom under failed tests. So there's failures down here for things other than just duct leakage. This was the pressure differential stuff that failed. And so for the clean file, you would go up here and make a change to say that it was, you've retested it and it is passing. That's how to document a failure and a retest. All right, I'm going to jump back to the larger workbook and on to the next tab. So we talked about unit testing results. That was this one. We're going to move on now to common area testing results. So the unit testing results are things that were happening in the apartments. Common area testing results are things that are happening in the common area. This tab is the common area ventilation tab. You're going to use this space to enter information about what's going on in some of the common spaces. And so this building has a lobby, a community room, and this is the ventilation that is required for that space based on square footage and the type of space that it is. You're going to pull this information from the HVAC design report, and the ventilation airflow designed per the HVAC design report. So one is sort of the minimum required, and then this is the design. both pieces of information, I'm going to jump over to another workbook. This is an HVAC design report for an example project, and I'll show you exactly where you're pulling this information from. So this is item 2.8 from the HVAC design report. You can see the lobby, the MEP, the engineer for the project, is reporting that 200 CFM is required for ASHRAE 62.1 and that 200 CFM is provided for that lobby. I've entered that information. We've entered that information right here. You can also have, there's also areas to report what was tested as part of final. You can see this is a different color. Oops, didn't want to do that. This is a different color, so this is required for preliminary design. The tested information is required for as-built. And so you can see there's a pass-fail down here. This pass-fail is really for the tested portion of this, of the tested CFM right now. And so it's making a comparison and it's adding up those two things and making a comparison up to the design. What it is not doing is making any sort of comparison between design and reported. The rater needs to do that sort of manually and be aware that they need to do that manually. So just because there is nothing down here indicating pass or fail when you are doing when you're evaluating or looking at the design versus what the minimum design needed to be. And so we wanted to point that out to say that, yeah, okay, there's 500 CFM is required by ASHRAE, but only 450 is provided. This is, there's something wrong here that needs to be fixed with the design, or perhaps it's an input error. But again, back here to the HVAC design, here's that input, here's the community room. In the example file, 500 CFM is required, 500 CFM is provided. And so I would just enter 500 in here. There's an area to indicate if any sampling was done while collecting information or testing the common space ventilation down below. And so you want to enter a note in here to say, yeah, I've reported all the design conditions for these common spaces, but we might have only tested we've only tested a handful of them based on what the sampling requirements are. Same thing down here for common space and shared garages. So this is exhaust airflow rates. So things like garages, trash rooms, janitors, kitchens, baths, they have ventilation requirements as well based on 62.1. That information is going to be pulled from a little bit further down in the HVAC design report. Here you can see the janitor room is at 50, trash room is at 200. The rater has taken that, that information from HVAC design and put it in here into the multifamily workbook. All right, we're going to skip the envelope stuff, and I know I'm kind of moving pretty quickly. We've got a lot to cover today. So we're going to skip over, but come back to envelope compliance stuff and fenestration. We're going to finish with that. These next few items are sort of like schedules. So starting with appliances, this is a schedule in which the rater has the ability to report information about the appliances in the building. At a minimum, if we were doing ERI, this would be where you are going to report those common space appliances. If it's ASHRAE or prescriptive, you're going to report all of the appliances for the building. Same thing for domestic hot water, service hot water. So this is taking information, the tag, what's being shown in plans, and saying what it is, what the hot water system is. You have the ability to put in what the manufacturer and model number is, even the AHRI certificate. Again, this is all sort of like schedule information. And it continues with 8, 9, and 11. Those tabs are all schedule related. I do want to spend a little bit of time going over the lighting tab. And so for lighting, information about dwelling unit lighting would be required for the prescriptive path. If the project is pursuing the ASHRAE path, they have the option to use the APC. So basically, information that was completed by the modeler. So the modeler is going to be reporting information about lighting as well, and MFNC would accept that for those ASHRAE projects in lieu of entering information about the dwelling unit in here. But for the information where it's not an ASHRAE project, what does it look like? How do we fill this information out? And so what you want to start with is entering information about fixtures. And so you're going to report the fixture watts and the efficacy. So the efficacy is just a drop down to say whether it's LEED, CFL, or not LED. It may be just an ENERGY STAR certified fixture, which is also acceptable. You enter the fixture watts, like I said, and then you can start assigning these fixtures to different spaces in the building. So again, if this is ZERI, you would only need to report this for the common areas. And there is functionality to not only generate what are the watts per square foot and do a comparison to say whether that's okay or not. What's really nice is the ability to say, are 90% at least LED? For a lot of projects, that's going to be one of the main compliance pathways for the lighting package. And so you can see right now, this one has are 90% of the fixtures in the building or 90% of the bulbs in the building LED. Right now, the answer is no, it's a fail. The reason that it is a fail is because this particular fixture D is currently marked as a CFL. They have CFL bulbs, and you can see there's a large number of them in the building. 68 is the total. This is just an add up of the number of fixtures within each one of these space types. So if I were to change this to LED, it's going to give me a pass because now 90% of my fixtures and bulbs are LED. Oh, and the multiplier. There is a multiplier over here. So let's say that you have 3 corridors in the building that are like identical. You can see that, these are very, very close, very, very similar in terms of square footage. You could give this a multiplier to say that there are, 2 corridors. You might then rename this to say corridor 1 through 3. You would enter 1 line item and say that that's, there's 3 of them, the multiplier of 3. Same thing holds true for up here in dwelling unit. If you do need to use the dwelling unit space to document what's going on with the lighting, the multiplier is, there's 20 A1 bathrooms in the project, so on and so forth. So that's lighting. We're going to move back to envelope right now. This is the envelope compliance tab. There is a drop down here to say, what do you want to use to show your compliance? Total UA is the sort of preferred method. And I believe there's a proposal to say that total UA would be the only compliance method to use for the MFNC program going forward with revision 5. So I have that checked off right here, total UA. This might not be there with revision 5. We'll see what the rest of everybody thinks about that proposal. This is what the total UA compliance tab looks like. And so you can see there is some information that's being pulled from the building info tab again. This is why you need to say in that building info tab whether it's prescriptive, what climate zone you're in, what version you're following, et cetera, because it's going to use that information to say whether you are sort of doing this UA compliance check correctly or not. And so for the dwelling unit, you have the option to make a comparison between the 2009 version, version of the code or the 2021 version of the code. That is going to be based on what version of the program you're following. So you can see when I click this off, I've said that we're doing version 1.1 of the program, but I have chosen a 2021 baseline comparison, and I've gotten an error warning over here. I'm not allowed to use that. I need to, for a prescriptive path project, I need to use the Energy Star multifamily reference design. So there are some pretty nice back checks in this particular tab to give you a heads up that you are doing it correctly or not, based on what you've told the tool in the past. I'm going to zoom out here a little bit, and I hope that that is still pretty visible. But you can see down here at the bottom, we've started inputting information about what this UA is for and what we're trying to document. And so you want to say whether this is a dwelling or common unit by clicking the drop-down menu, and then you want to talk about what type of assembly, what type of building component are you wanting to analyze or document. And so we've got dwelling and common spaces down here. Pick. It's going to be a slightly different question that you get next, but for this one, it's a ceiling assembly. The tool then pulls in, okay, what is the minimum U value needed for that type of assembly, and gives you the required UA that you're shooting for. For this particular assembly, the user in this example workbook has said, oh, it's, this assembly is equivalent to a U factor of 0.021, which is identical to the minimum requirement, 0.021. The user has also entered in how much square footage that particular assembly, that particular component takes up in the building. And so you just repeat that as you go through the different assemblies, ceiling, wall, windows. Windows is included here. You need to do the windows on the UA. There's also slab on grade floors. This is meant to be the perimeter of a slab on grade floor. There's even a thing for projected concrete floor edge balcony. And so all of that information is entered here. The rater is asked to input what the U value is for that assembly. The rater is also asked to provide a description of that assembly in sort of like build-up terms. So like from inside to outside, it's half-inch chip with cavity insulation between, whatever, like you're sort of like writing that out. And then you are also asked to provide a reference for how that U value was accomplished. So for a lot of the common space stuff, you're gonna look into ASHRAE Appendix A. If you're not familiar with ASHRAE Appendix A, it's a very helpful reference tool. Highly recommend you do get familiar with it, because program is asking you to sort of say, how you're supporting the U value that you've entered over here in column F. Yeah, so that's the envelope. It compares the total UA to the required UA. You can see up here right now we've got a fail. Something isn't quite passing. It's probably this, I think it's this balcony projected concrete floor that has not been insulated. And so if I delete that area, yeah, it does pass. And so the pass fail is very helpful, and also the percentage, like how close is the project to meeting those requirements. And then to troubleshoot this, trying to figure out, well, which one is causing me to probably fail. You can start looking at what the total UA based on the U values in the area you entered versus what the required UA is, which is based on the area entered and the U value that Energy Star is holding. And so it's going to do a big comparison and look at the building all as a whole. All right, last bit here is the fenestration. I did mention that the windows are included. You need to put those into the UA calc. That is part of the UA compliance tab. In addition to that is a need to enter information specific about the windows. And this is the only area in the workbook where SHGC is reported. There is a requirement, Energy Star has a requirement for minimum SHGCs. This is where that information is reported. And it's sort of the same methodology. You've got your plus and minus for columns and rows down here. But you're going to enter the window ID. You're going to say whether it's a Class AW window or not. Residential is sort of the more common input to put here. So residential, not Class AW. You're going to say whether it's fixed or operable, the quantity, the area. It's going to calculate the total area, and again, do a U-value comparison. So it's going to look at the windows for the dwelling units as a whole, and you're going to do the same thing for the common spaces. You're going to look at the windows for the common spaces as a whole. And so when you use common space, you'll see that metal curtain and storefront can also be an option here. And yeah, it just makes a comparison between the U value that's required and then the calculated U value based on areas and you can come up with a weighted U factor for your windows. But really, SHGC is one of the more important things to remember to put in here for this tab. And I think I've gotten pretty much to the end of what I wanted to go over. Sarah, I think we're going to be looking to you now for some comments about ZERH.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to proceed, but someone let me know if there are any audio or screen issues, and we'll try and get them sorted out. So hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. As Scott said, my name is Sarah Koch, and I am the multifamily lead for the DOE Zero Energy Ready Home program. Based on the responses we got during registration, it looks like a good number of you are already either familiar with the program or you're interested in learning more, which is really great to see. So if you are familiar, you're probably aware that DOE released Multifamily version 2 in November of last year, and that Energy Star Multifamily New Construction version 1.2 is required for all ZERH Multifamily version 2 projects. Because there's so much overlap between the two programs, and because we wanted to limit the amount of double documentation that partners would need to do, EPA has been great and has allowed us to create some addenda to the Energy Star Multifamily Workbook that adds in the ability to use the same document to show compliance with Zero Ready. So in the next couple of minutes, I'm going to share with you an updated version of the workbook that isn't quite posted yet, but will be very soon. The one that's currently posted on the EPA site and that we've been viewing so far includes ZERH Multifamily version 2 national, but it doesn't include California or Multifamily version 2 for, or pardon me, it doesn't include version 1 revision 9. So this draft workbook that I'm sharing does include those two program types. So here on the Building Information tab, one thing to note is that, as Scott showed us, when you first download and open the workbook, if you're on no, you're not going to see any Zero Ready tabs. And if you're not doing Zero Ready, just leave it at no, nothing else you need to do. And then you can see here that we've got version 1 revision 9 and version 2 available. So if we click on version 1 revision 9, we've got an introductory tab briefly. And then more importantly, we've got the rater checklist and the PV Ready checklist. So here's the version 1 revision 9 rater checklist. At the top, we have the option for 2 different pathways, which are prescriptive and ERI. And notice that revision 9 can't be used in California, so there's no Title 24 option here. Scrolling down, we can see on the right-hand side that there are several items that might not be required based on exceptions or alternatives. So wherever you see an orange box, there's a possibility that something's not required because it doesn't make sense for your project based on exceptions available. And for documenting that, we ask for the end note that mentions the exception you're using. So for example, dwelling unit windows, if we look at this footnote, we can see that there is an exemption for windows used as part of a passive solar design. So then if we're using that exemption, then we go over here, we enter a note 6, and just make a note that we're not meeting this requirement due to being part of a passive solar design. So then there are 2 other tabs to point out there that are associated with revision 9, which are the PV checklist and the prescriptive table. So first, the PV checklist, this is really straightforward. There's not really any options. You just kind of fill it out as you see here. Then back on the rater checklist, if you're following the prescriptive path, we have this table here, prescriptive specifications, which is the place that you would document measures that otherwise would be captured in the ERI or ASHRAE models, like HVAC and water heating efficiency levels. So that's this table here. And then of course, this is not required for ERI path or ASHRAE path projects. We need to update that. It's neither ERI nor ASHRAE. This is only for prescriptive path projects that need to fill out this tab. So that's it for revision 9. Now let's take a quick look at version 2. So if we go back to building information and we move to version 2 here, we see the introduction tab that Scott showed before. And we'll go all the way to the edge, to the right side of all our tabs here, and we're back at the rater checklist for version 2. So it's a little bit more complicated than the revision 9 one. As you can see at the top, there's a few more options, but it's very similar to Energy Stars. So we've got the 3 pathways, prescriptive, ASHRAE, ERI, and clicking these buttons will hide various rows that are required or have a different requirement based on your pathway. And then we also have multifamily version 2 for California here as well. And so just like revision 9, we have the ability to fill in exceptions on the right side here. Where it's orange, there are exceptions available, and then in the blue box here, you would add any notes to help the reviewer understand why you've claimed an exception. I'd like to draw our attention quickly to the building envelope section here, so that's requirement number 3. The ZERH Multifamily version 2 and Energy Star Multifamily version 1.2 have very similar requirements for building envelope, but in some cases, Zero Ready requires a slightly different envelope UA. So in this row, we programmed in an automatic check. So if we click on Show Calculation, then we see our total UA and total UA limit, and I've just put in kind of random values into our building envelope tab. So you can see we're passing by quite a lot here, which is probably not typical. But it shows a pass here, and then this box tells us, okay, is our UA actually different from Energy Star or not? And in this case, it is. So this is just a helpful row to make sure that you're filling out this item of the checklist correctly. And we have a similar one down here for infiltration, if I can find it, so we can show an infiltration calculation as well. Let's see, okay, and then down in rows 8 and 9, you can see we have a PV ready checklist and an EV ready checklist. So version 2 has both PV and EV ready requirements. So briefly over on the PV ready checklist, you can see that we have some exceptions you can reveal here. And then there's quite a few different ones that will sort of reduce the amount of EV readiness you need based on various different factors. So I would review those before moving forward, and the same thing on the EV ready checklist. You can show the exceptions and hide the exceptions. And that is about it for the ZERH tabs. I just want to update folks that this version of the document should be posted in the next couple of weeks, so keep an eye out. And not in this update, but in the update after that, we will be including the functionality that Energy Star currently has for auto-generating certificates for all units in the building, but that will not be supported in the one that's going to be posted in the next couple of weeks. And again, the one that's currently posted supports multifamily version 2 national, but not California or version 1 revision 9. And that is it for me. Thank you everyone very much for your attention.
Great, thanks, Sarah. I think that's all the prepared content we had. Rebecca, is there anything that we want to go back to in terms of answering questions or anything?
Rebecca unmutes, I'm going to hop in there, Scott. We did have a quick question that I thought Sarah could actually answer while she still has the screen. You won't need the screen for it, Sarah. But the question was, if a project team is doing ASHRAE and the ERI path, one of those two paths, just to get their Energy Star certification, for zero energy ready homes, can they switch to the prescriptive path?
That's a good question. And don't quote me, but I believe the answer is yes, but I would need to double check that. But I think it would make the most sense to continue in the same path that you've already been working in. Typically, prescriptive is a little bit more difficult because you can't trade off anything. And if you've already done an ERI or ASHRAE model, you can use the same model for zero energy ready. So it wouldn't typically be done, but I would say I think it is possible.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So in terms of other questions, I think many have been answered. Trying to see which ones might be good to pull out for the group.
While you look through, I had one that I answer for one of the attendees. If you could hand screen share back to Scott, unless you want to do the navigating, I'll prep Scott for the question. It was on the in-unit testing results tab. So while you pull that up, I'm just gonna, it was a question, I think it's just only because we're moving fast. So if you saw something that flagged it and you typed in the question, you might not have had a chance to see where the information was. It was about the failed tested, that table at the bottom for your failed units.
Yes.
So I've answered the partner, but I think it's a good question to answer for the group. So you have your main table, and then you would scroll down. I think you were talking through the fact that if you do happen to have a failed blower door, or failed duct blast, or whatever, you would come down here and you would copy, see in row 110, you copy the entire roof row from the table above for any failed tests, because we do want to document any units that failed. And then, for example, unit 103, if it had one failure and it's reported down here, it stays here for documentation, but we're going to want to see the passing result back up in the main table. So that was one of the questions that a partner asked, and I thought it'd be good for the rest of the folks to see that one.
Yep. So there's 103. I think this example file does have some failed stuff that is up in what we would anticipate to be the clean sort of like completely done, it's tested, everything's passing. And so this example file has some things that aren't quite meeting some of the things, but yeah, the expectation is to have green pass across the board up here, and reporting kind of like, what happened. Tell us, not all the gory details, but do tell us about, well, this one did struggle to pass that kitchen ventilation initially, and this is where it would be documented. Does that answer the question?
I think you did.
Cool.
Rebecca, do you have another question you want to pull up, or shall I grab one?
You can, if you've got one.
Okay, it's an easy one, but it was a question about indoor air plus. We've got two questions. If you jump back to your, I think, building information, I think we're so used to our acronyms, we neglected to explain what IAP stands for, but that's indoor air plus. The follow-up question was whether this workbook, see how it's already working nicely with the other federal programs. The question was indoor air plus certification, was that going to get built into this workbook? I think that's a big question. So I think if partners are interested in that, I think the more feedback that gets sent to EPA, whether it's Energy Star or Indoor Air Plus, send that feedback, and maybe that is something that could be developed, but that is not, it's not currently part of this workbook.
Yep. No, you can't. There is no drop down for that section.
And another one that came in on whether we'll be integrating the new sampling protocol from ResNet. And so we will be updating the workbook this year to incorporate the new sampling protocol. We'll be able to select that. I'll note that currently it calculates based on the older protocol set, which is allowed to be used right now for projects going through ResNet as well. And you can always do more than what is currently in the workbook, but it doesn't document it yet for you, but we do plan on updating that.
Yeah, so there's the numbers. So with 52 units, it is using the current, the ones that are in effect right now, but not the updated sampling protocols just yet.
I think we'll give folks a few more minutes to type questions in since we have 5 minutes. And I think Rebecca and I are just combing through to see what other questions weren't so specific that they could be useful to this larger audience. So just hang tight.
So I am seeing a question here about Indoor Air Plus being required for Zero Ready and how that's going to be handled when the workbook becomes required. So yes, it's true that not including it would be inconvenient. You would be working in a couple of different documents if you're using the workbook. It's worth noting that in the Zero Ready rater checklist, there is a box for completing Indoor Air Plus. So it is a reminder that needs to be happening, but this is good feedback to know that including IIP could be helpful to partners. And please feel free to send that feedback to ZERH or EPA, and we can think about including it in the future.
Thanks, Sarah. So we do have another question that I think we could tackle, Scott. If we jump to 5C, we do have some questions, and I know this topic is near and dear to your heart. I'm just going to read the question. So it says for tab number 5, where do the UA values and numbers usually come from for a project? Fenestration seems straightforward, but curious if the UA values for the other assemblies are sourced from the design checklist or other project documents.
Great question. And this is something that takes a little bit of time to document, but when it's done, it feels great to have it all sort of like laid out and documented in a way that somebody else, when they pick this file up, is going to be able to reasonably well follow the breadcrumbs you've laid. And so the answer, I think, is this Appendix A table, and getting that, using that Appendix A and writing the actual table, the A.5.3, sorry, A5.3 in this case for a ceiling assembly. So if we were to go to ASHRAE Appendix A, I would hope that A5.3 is actually for a ceiling assembly, and it is going to be able to, the reviewer is going to be able to look at the description of layers and pretty reasonably get to pretty much the same U value that the rater has shown here. As we mentioned before, it is super critical for those common space items to do it that way, especially if it's an ERI project. I've also seen, and I think would be acceptable to the program for an ERI project that is also doing, unitized energy modeling, that you would be able to sort of say and talk about, what the U value was based on the buildup that was put into the modeling. It's my understanding that that modeling is largely based on ASHRAE Appendix A, and so we're all sort of playing from the same playbook when we reference this ASHRAE Appendix A. What could not be used is just taking the U factor directly from the plans that an architect or designer is just saying that's what the U value is without any support documentation. That's going to be a red flag, especially when it's probably, if it would be clearly off, clearly out of line. The reason to do this exercise is to sort of double check that Energy Star envelope backstop and make sure that it's somewhat accurate, that it's pretty accurate. I think another area to use might be a com check or a res check. Those two are built off of, my understanding, ASHRAE Appendix A.
Well, we are definitely at time. I'm not sure, Chris, if you want the last word here, but thanks to everyone for joining us. Thank you to Sarah. Thank you to Scott for presenting this information. Again, you will get the link to this. It is, not many slides, but there will be a link to the recording that will be available, and you see those the links in the chat. So thanks to everyone for joining us today.
Thanks all.